Hey everybody, it's Irene with BrainStormAcres. We have weather coming in soon. And by weather I mean Tuesday is supposed to be about 25 degrees at night. So we are working hard towards getting things set up. And one of the things that happened in that process is we harvested a bunch of red chilies. That's awesome, but I don't have a need for red chilies right now. So what we're going to do is actually dry them. And the easy way to do that is to simply create a ristra, which is a string of red chilies. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to start by creating a knot and putting the bottom chili through that knot, and everybody else will be sewn on. So I just created a slip knot here. Now, in the past, sometimes I have sewn every chili on, but of course the slip knot's not working because that would be too easy. If there's any way you want to, you can tie it on, you can create a slip knot. There we go, it's on, it's solid. And then I'm going to simply take my chilies and stick the needle right through the stem, right above the cap. Now I am using a thick string. In this case, I am using old crochet cotton that is a little off-colored, so I wouldn't actually use it to make something with, but it's perfect for things like this. I use it for all kinds of utilitarian purposes. And all I'm doing is continuing this, sliding them down, and kind of letting them spiral around. I am watching for things that have any kind of off colors on them, where they might spoil, because I don't want them to spoil, I want them to dry. Once they're dry, they will sit around for virtually ever. They make a great decoration, but at any moment I could decide to grind them up and use them as chili peppers. So that's what I'm going to do until I run out of chili peppers, or until I decide I have enough on one string. Now, if I had tried to make that slip knot, I couldn't have. Fortunately, I can also unmake it just as easy as it happened. That's a good thing. What I'm going to do with any of the ones that have a slightly off spot is I'm going to string those together so that I know that those are the ones we'll use first. These are Sandia variety chilies. We grew them in our greenhouse this year as an experiment, and it worked really well. When we were first married, we lived in New Mexico. These were extremely common decorations there. We actually have one that's ceramic that hangs on our wall here so that we can have it all year, whether we've grown chilies or not. And we actually do have plastic ones that go on the Christmas lights, and we also have a glass one that goes on the Christmas tree. An important part of the festive season, red chilies. Okay, we've only got a couple here that have any kind of spots on them, which is really good. A total of 4. So there's our first ristra. I can sort of straighten that out a little, make it look a little nicer as I go on. But the main purpose of it is simply to dry the chilies. They get good air circulation. They're very decorative in the process, etc., etc. I'll probably hang these on the wall. I'll have to think about it. Probably will hang these on the wall. I might wind up hanging them briefly in the pantry simply because I still have onions on the wall over there. But we'll see. There we go. Okay, good enough. Big knot at the top so that it's thoroughly anchored. I'm going to cut off that extra string and use it to string the other chilies here that are in more danger of croaking. Does that sound scientific enough? In this case, what I did was I stuck it through the chili top same way as before. I tied a knot so I didn't have to fiddle with any sort of a slip knot or anything else. Okay. Very cheerful. Yes, indeed. And that's all there is to it. Put them someplace out of the sun. Well, some people do put them in the sun. We tend to keep them out of the sun, but with good air circulation and that sort of thing. I'm going to put another thread back into here just so I don't lose the needle. This is a big tapestry needle. You do want a pretty sturdy needle for this sort of thing. I usually use this for putting buttons on button cards when I sell them. You could use buttonhole thread, pretty much anything, but it needs to be sturdy. It shouldn't be regular sewing thread. If you have to use regular sewing thread, you need to do multiples of them, and that's kind of not a great choice. Now, what else have I been doing this weekend? I have been drying things. There is dill seed. There is dill weed. There is tarragon. There is more tarragon. We obviously save old spice bottles. This is Thai basil. And this is oregano. And right now I have a dehydrator working in the studio. I have a cat banging at the door too. Hi, Isa. Come on. I have dehydrator screens like this in my dehydrator down in the studio right now. This just happens to be rosemary. I'm not running it in a dehydrator. I just picked it this morning. I've had a couple of requests to talk about drying various herbs, and I don't pretend to be any kind of a major guru on this. I have done it before, but the basic idea that I would give anyone who wants to do this is the rules I hear, okay? I have never done the chemical analysis to make sure this is true or not. But most people will tell you, choose your herbs, pick them in the morning as soon as they're dry, but before it gets really hot, because you want to maximize the amount of volatile oils that are in the herbs. Choose stems that are not blooming. So for instance, on my lavender, if I wanted the lavender leaves, I would choose a stem that didn't have flowers on it. Usually what I personally harvest is actually the lavender flowers, and they are way past blooming at this point of year. What I did in the case of the rosemary is, one of my big complaints with rosemary is I have often eaten at restaurants where the flavor was there, but it was like chewing on pine needles. They had these big chunks of rosemary leaves in there, which I swear it's like chewing on a pine needle. It's just not attractive. So what I actually did was I chose this morning and yesterday also the growing tips of new branches. They are not blooming, and they are going to be a more tender, smaller leaf. I have not dried them in a dehydrator before. Usually if I'm drying herbs in the past, most of the time I would just make a bundle. And what I mean by that is literally take some stems like this and tie them with a string, and hang them up. I used to hang them up in the walk-in closet because it was dark, it was dry, and they were actually right over the door. So when I would start to notice little bits and pieces of herbs falling down, I knew they were completely dry. This year, we decided that was silly, and we should probably take advantage of the fact that we own a dehydrator. So, as you can see, I do have already some things dehydrated. I had one of those little revelations the other day when I was making pizza that I was rapidly sucking down my purchased oregano, and we use it every Friday when I make pizza. So, because we have a mix that we had purchased, like at a big box store, but that mix is, I don't think it's expired, but it's just not, doesn't have enough oregano in it. So we use some of the mix, and then I always grab the oregano jar and fling in a bit more. And I said, well, that's very silly. I have an entire yard full of oregano. So what I have right now in the dehydrator is actually trays of peppermint. That's a different thing. But I have picked up another batch of oregano from the garden. Now, when I chose my oregano, I did the same sort of thing as I did with the basil. I chose the nicest stems I could find. These were picked this morning, so they're a little wimpier than they were earlier. And what I will actually do is I will strip the leaves off of these. If I were to throw this entire thing in to the dehydrator, it would take quite a while to dehydrate because it's got a fleshy stem to it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to sit down, I'm going to turn on a video, get comfortable, and I'm going to pick off all the leaves that are nice. Nothing that's blemished, nothing that has bug holes in it, nothing that's got weird colors to it or anything else, and I'm just going to go through like that and pick off those leaves. Then, see, like that one's got a black spot. This one, it's got a hole in it, but it looks okay. He just got chomped by somebody. And I'm going to do that all the way down the stem. This goes in the recycle. These will go into the dehydrator. And because these are thin, really luscious leaves, and I also make sure they're clean, I try not to wash them. What I did here was I was very careful when I picked them this morning to choose stems that were upright, not laying in the mud or anything like that. And that's what I'll do with these. I will simply dry just the leaves. It's way faster. Your goal is always to get the water out of the herbs without losing the volatile oils. So that's what gives the herb, like one of the very popular things right now is you can buy essential oils, is what they call them. Very vague terminology in the general marketplace, unfortunately. But it just means the oils that are taken from specific types of herbs, usually. If I dry this, bone dry, and I sniff it, now I just did this morning, so you can really smell it. But if I had a piece that was laying out on the counter for a while, and I sniffed it, you might not be able to smell anything particularly. It would just be kind of like nothing much. The minute I crumble that, it breaks open the center of that leaf again, and the oils come out. So when I use my dehydrator, I'm drying everything at the lowest temperature that the dehydrator will work at, which in my case is 95 degrees. And basically that's just like a hot day around here with some breeze on it. And it's pretty amazing how fast moisture will come out of plants when you do it that way. And especially by stripping off the leaves like this, all I'm dealing with is this really wonderful little flat leaf, and it's a half a millimeter to a millimeter thick. So that dehydrates really fast. And that's what your goal is, to dehydrate it quickly while not overheating it. If you overheat, like I've heard of people drying herbs in the oven, you probably could if you had an old-fashioned oven that has a pilot light. But because I know you can I used to start bread dough in a pilot lit oven, and it just kept it warmer, and it was the confined space plus a little bit of heat from the pilot light, and it was fine. But you want to be careful because you don't want to, you're effectively cooking off the essential oils and you don't want to do that. Our goal before we get frozen this week is to get as much oregano, Thai basil, regular basil, rosemary, and peppermint put away as we can. The dill is already pretty much done. I'm going to double check to see if there's any other plants I've missed out there. If I have, I will harvest them and dry them too. There might also be 1 or 2 seed heads that I've missed, but I don't think so. It's the end of the season, so we're kind of pushing it at this point. The Thai basil is in the greenhouse, so we have probably until Monday night to harvest that. But I'm trying to crunch through and get as much of this taken care of as I can because we really don't want to lose it. For some reason, there's years where we just don't seem to, get around to it. I mean, it's October. I have had oregano out there probably since May, and most of the peppermint came out in about May or June. I used a bunch for cooking. It just somehow never got around to drying it. So better late than never. I may not have enough to get me all the way through the winter, but I'm sure going to try. I hope this helps. It's not hard. It takes a little time. If you don't have a dehydrator, just get yourself some string and string it up and let it dry. If you're drying it outside of a dehydrator, keep it in the dark as much as you can. Definitely not in direct sunlight, and best air circulation you can get. So if I had to do it in here, for instance, in the kitchen, that wall over there never gets direct sun, so I might decide to hang it up over there. Good air circulation, all that sort of stuff. I would not store permanently herbs in the kitchen because it's going to pick up the grease from cooking. And as soon as you've got grease on it, then you've got dust that sticks to it. Not cool. And Isa now has decided that she's in, so she's on the wrong side of the door. She can wait for a minute. So if you hear a cat meowing in the background, that's what it is. Our cat Isa, she was outside, she wanted to come in. Now she's inside and she wants to go out. We're trying to put up as much as we can. We've had trouble already starting to get some of our herbs. I'm still looking for some whole allspice. And I've been to 3 grocery stores so far and a specialty store. So I'm hoping tomorrow I will luck out and find some. If not, I'm going to order it online because I'm not going to wait around to see if I can't get it forever. She's going crazy over there. Let's see if I can catch a picture of her. She says they're watching me. I don't want them to know that I'm being crazy. See, now I'm going to go over and pop out Mama. She's not going to be crazy now because she says they're watching me. I don't want them to be able to prove that I'm crazy.
A few moments later.
I hope you find this useful. It's not hard. It is a little time consuming. I'm using it as an excuse to catch up on some videos. When I get done with the herbs, and let me give you this right now while I'm thinking of it. When I get done with the herbs, I will make sure this counter is completely clean. Get a piece of parchment paper and put the herbs here. I can then squish them. Either I haven't been doing it with a rolling pin, I've just been doing it with my hands. All I'm doing is breaking up the larger leaves so they'll fit better into jars. And then I can easily scoop it in here and then at the end, pour it in to your jar. I anticipate doing the same thing for all the herbs. I think that some things like the oregano dries a lot faster than the basil does. Not the basil. Oregano dries a lot faster than the rosemary does. Get the right herb here. The peppermint dries pretty quickly. A lot of it mostly depends on the thickness of the leaf. If you'll think about it, rosemary leaves are kind of like little pine needles. They're sort of roundish and they're fleshier. So I expect these guys to take longer. It's one of the reasons I'm pushing through the oregano first because I know I can get that in and out of the dehydrator and finish the process. Then I'm bagging this stuff up right away. When I do things like dill seed, I actually leave the lid off a bit, or at least cracked, so that any extra moisture could come out of there, because these are usually coming in from outside. I have a container over there that I toss them into, and then I let them sit for a week or two, but I always make sure that they're bone dry when the lid finally does go on. The dill weed, if it is dried in the dehydrator, I immediately close the lid on, because I don't want it to absorb moisture. Now, usually absorbing moisture is not a big deal here, but right now we've actually been having some rains, so our moisture level here is higher than usual, and the way to preserve your herbs is to have them bone dry. Some things also freeze well. Dill weed actually freezes well for use in cooking. Now, any of these things, if you freeze them, will be mushy. They will have lost their crispness. That's pretty typical of what happens when you freeze things. But you can freeze fresh dill weed to use in salmon and other meals like that. We did not do that this year. Freezer space is a real premium for us, so we just make sure that when we use it, we rehydrate it well before we actually use it on things. I also sometimes have, in the past, grown dill in the house. Slight success. It worked out okay. I'm going to do a little more research to see if I can find something that's a little bit more compact. Something that would, kind of stay on the windowsill rather than taking over the dining room. But it did work well last year. We didn't get any seeds out of that, which I didn't expect to, but we did use a lot of the dill early in the season before the stuff had come out in the garden. So what I might do this coming spring is try growing it in the greenhouse. But dill is definitely frost intolerant, shall we say. So I'd have to be really convinced that I wasn't going to freeze the greenhouse at all. And most of what we grow in the greenhouse in the spring is brassicas, things in the cabbage family. So those are very frost resistant. So we don't have to worry too much about keeping it super warm in there. So I have to think about that. That is, recheck the greenhouse. Yes, I have to do that too. So until next time, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, because obviously there's going to be lots more going on. We've got a ton of decisions to make about the various tomatoes around here. I've been freezing a bunch of tomatoes like this that are ripe, perfectly fine, and need to be made into sauce, but I don't have time to make sauce right now. So I've got 2 big bags in the freezer right now. I've got room for 2 more before I run out of freezer space there. I might be able to get 3 more in there if I really squish things, but I'm trying not to trash the freezer. So somewhere in the next week or 2, maybe later this week, we will make tomato sauce. But we were gathering all the tomatoes together because you make a terrible mess of your kitchen when you make tomato sauce. And didn't want to trash it just for a small batch. That's fine if you want to make a fresh tomato sauce that you're using immediately, but we can ours, so it makes sense. So again, I hope this is helpful. I'm trying to think if there were any other specific questions regarding herbs. I can't think of any. If you have any, put them in the comments down below. We always read all the comments, and we answer anything that we have the answer for. So until next time, bye.